do think we need to learn from the enormous pain that people suffer during the lockdown as we approach restrictions going forward, because there are strict restrictions in place in respect of the number of people who can attend funerals in Dublin right now and in Donegal right now. And that pain that was displayed and we heard very clearly and was very real on Liveline needs to be listened to, because in my home county of Clare this morning it was announced that communions and confirmations were being cancelled for public health reasons, based on public health advice that the Bishop of Killaloe received. And he was very clear that the advice wasn't that the communions and confirmations themselves that posed a risk, it was the gatherings afterwards. Now, I just would question whether that's the same thing with funerals. Is it the funerals themselves? Is it people in a church, which by and large are large open spaces that are well ventilated, or is it the gatherings afterwards that are the risk? And if it is the gatherings afterwards, then surely maybe we need to look at the cathartic effect that it has for people to go to the funeral of a loved one, to be able to facilitate that, even if it means that they can't gather afterwards as they normally would, but to be able to attend the actual funeral of a loved one. You know, we do need to move forward with a degree of humanity, because I think people felt that was robbed of them, that very important moments in their life was taken from them, and maybe last moments. And as somebody who buried somebody very close to me this year, I appreciate how horrendous it must be not to at least be able to go through the funeral experience. So I think we need to learn from that grief as well as blame and as well as seek retribution, because sometimes when you suffer or feel bullied, it's hard to see others not suffering the same thing because of the pain that you've suffered. But we do need to learn from it, maybe, and be a bit more constructive about it. This algorithm was set up to deliver a fair result, and part of that algorithm initially was the school's historical performance. That was taken out, I understand, at the last minute because of the furore that there was in Scotland and England. So if it was part of the algorithm to deliver a fair result and it was taken out at the last minute, instead of unfairly advantaging students who went to those schools, the pendulum does appear anecdotally to have swung the other way, and they were unfairly disadvantaged. Now, I'm not saying that was an error. It might have been foreseeable. It might have been the minister's intention to avoid political difficulty, but did it deliver a fundamentally unfair result for students who went to schools which were historically high performing? Many of which were private,
actually, of course,
not all of which were private. And this is being litigated in the courts right now. And I think rather than if there is an unfairness there, and the department will know that, rather I'd like it to be addressed now, because what we don't want is for them to stonewall this and be dragged kicking and screaming. And if they're to lose this court case, I think it would be catastrophic, because they have an opportunity now to address everything rather than have to wait to be dragged kicking and screaming through the courts. Yeah. There are tens, not thousands, but tens of native German speakers who didn't get top grades and were downgraded. Something just doesn't seem right about the grading system and the way it worked. As a TD, I spent a lot of time earlier this year talking to the University of Limerick and trying to get them to refund monies paid by students for accommodation that they no longer needed because of the lockdown. I was less successful in negotiations with private institutions that offer student accommodation. The nature of student accommodation buildings is that you pay in advance for a full term. And while the University of Limerick, which is a state body, did the right thing, lots of private owned institutions did not. So there are many students who have paid accommodation now up to Christmas for student accommodation, which they may not need and probably won't get a refund from in the case of private institutions. Initially, we were told that we needed to flatten the curve in order to ensure that our healthcare system wasn't overrun and that we didn't run out of healthcare capacity, because we had such little capacity. In 2018, the Department of Health's Health Service Capacity Review said we needed 430 ICU beds. Coming into this crisis, we had 225. And what I'm amazed by is in the last 6 months, the very limited amount of capacity increase there has been. What have we been doing for 6 months? Yes, I appreciate there's an excellent winter plan. Hundreds, if not thousands, of medics are going to be hired.
If I could get in, just let's all in, because we're actually over time now, Michael. We're over time. In 30 seconds.
I suppose with 442 cases tonight, 14 in my own county in Clare, I don't think it's a time for anyone to be pushing back right now on public health advice. There's a mid-term plan for living with COVID. There is a winter hospital plan, 600 million, the largest injection of capital ever. It's not a panacea. This won't be a... This will not be a...
There are 37 people on trolleys in Limerick.
Okay, I'm going to have...